Hi, this is Micornus, Phokane, the leader and the founder of Church Governance Solutions. We are dealing with the same topic, what makes dynamic pastors? What makes pastors dynamic? Very, very important that we deal with this topic. You can revert back to look at part 1 and 2 and part 3 as well in the past that we've dealt with. This is part 4, of course, today. So join us as we deal with this particular topic. Very, very important. And every pastor want to be dynamic. And I'm sure you agree with me that the more dynamic you are, the more you are able to articulate the vision that God has given you. The more you are able to walk along with your church and your congregation to follow you and become part of what you are doing. Very, very important that you take notice of that. That dynamism as a pastor is not just an option, it's something that is necessary. So therefore, you need to be dynamic as a pastor so that you can lead your church with this dynamism. The first thing that I want to emphasize that people that are dynamic or pastors that are dynamic, they are having what we call courageous change. They're having what we call courageous change. And a courageous change comes along with what we call decisiveness. And they have got courageous change and they are very decisive as well. And this is very important that if you are to run a church, if you are to become a leader, and a leader who is somebody who's influential to get people follow you, you must have what we call courageous change. You must be decisive as well. The book of Acts chapter 10, verse 11 to 15, you can read it at your own spare time. Make sure that you look at that. So we look at decisiveness at its own best there. We look at being courageous in changing as well. Because it's very, very important that you become courageous, you become decisive as well. Because people that are undecisive cannot make up their mind of what they want or what they want to do. Therefore, they cannot win along their own members or people that are following them. They cannot win along their followers into what they believe in because they don't have courageous change. They are not decisive in nature. Now, dynamic pastors possess the courage to change, and they've got actually no gripe about changing. And that is why if a dynamic pastor, if they're doing something and therefore all of a sudden they go and learn something from someone else or another church, they're able to come and implement it in their own church. They're able to change from how they used to do things and do things better. Because that's the only way you're going to be successful as a dynamic pastor. That you learn from others. You also learn some few habits that you do, and you continue following the trend of a new thing that you've learned and implement it and make sure that it gets to be implemented. Because if you don't do so, then you're going to have a problem whereby you're going to stick to the old habits. You're going to stick to the old ways of doing things, and therefore you will not make any growth or any difference. Now, I want to emphasize that dynamic pastors, while they possess the courage to change, they make sure that they remove things that hinders growth in them. They realize them, they are able to diagnose things that are within them that hinders growth. And when they realize that something hinders growth, they deal with it immediately. It's not something that they're going to postpone and say, I'll do it tomorrow. They don't procrastinate. They basically decide now and say, I want to change from this, or I want to do things differently from now on. And they will actually implement immediately the now on moment. They confront change and they bring needed change to the church as well. So please, as a dynamic person, confront change, confront things that need to be changed, and make sure that you bring that needed change in your church. Because there are things that we learn along the way, and there are ways that we're doing things, and then we stick to those things, and we think that that's the only way to do things. But I want to urge you now that be aware that it's not the only way of doing things. We need to change along the way. And a wise man is that which is able to change his mind and change along the way, and that's what we call dynamism. And you become dynamic that way. So make sure that anything that hinders the work of the ministry, you remove it. And anything that progresses or enhances the ministry growth, then you embrace that, and that will actually make you to continue doing very well. Now, there are church systems. There are some methods of doing things. There are some systems that are implemented in churches, and sometimes is in a form of traditions as well. And I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. That there are some traditions that are outdated and they must be changed. There are some ways of doing things that must be changed. There are some dynamic things that are getting in that we must do. And I must emphasize this because I've seen some of us who are pastors of the old who still want to operate church in the very same old manner. I remember a friend of mine is totally refusing to put his church on social media platforms. He's refusing totally. And a friend of mine who is refusing actually to even have a YouTube channel, and refusing totally to have a Facebook page for his church. And that's not being dynamic, because you cannot run the church like in the time of the old. We used to have cassettes at that time. Remember? We used to have VHS videos in those days. We then had DVDs at some stage, you remember? And we had CDs at some stage, you remember, where we used to record our sermons, our messages as well, and distribute them on hard copies. And I'm sure you would remember that we moved on to some memory sticks as well that would keep some messages, and we distribute them on a physical basis. Now, we are actually in an age of online, and I'm sure you realize that that needs dynamism. That needs somebody who's actually dynamic to say, now we're running the church this way, but for our church to be exposed out there, to reach out to the souls out there, we cannot afford not to have social media platform. We cannot afford not to be on internet as a church, because that's very important. And that's part of being dynamic. And if you want to be a dynamic pastor, realize that the change has arrived. And please embrace the change and be a changed person. You cannot keep the old systems. You cannot continue with the old religious way of reaching out. And I'm sure you remember, in the olden days, we used to do door-to-doors and evangelism campaigns. We used to put up tents for crusades. And you look at it now, is actually that type of approach becomes a bit diminishing, because there are some communities that may not even allow an open air to be made at the corner of a street. But there are means that you can use. There are social platforms that you can use. There are internet platforms that you can use. So all those methods, you must actually embrace them all. And if the old system is still working, continue using the old system, but please be open-minded as well to become dynamic, so that where change is necessary, you change without being too traditional about it, because there are many that becomes too traditional. They want to hang on to the old systems, and they feel like the new systems are coming to destroy the church, and they are not. So please make sure that you become dynamic. Now, make sure that you're not afraid also to take decisions. And because people that are afraid to take decisions, they are delaying their own churches. They are delaying their own ministries. They cannot progress because they're just delaying in making decisions. They are not fascinating, but decisive for growth and progress as well. So make sure that you're decisive for growth and progress, and you're not just getting fascinating. Very, very important that you do so. Now, the next point that I want to just mention that makes pastors to be dynamic is to be initiative and also to become creative as well. To become initiative and to become creative. Very, very important. Now, dynamic pastors are creative in nature, and they take initiative to do things that will bring growth. They make sure that they think out of the box. They plan things in advance, and they make sure that they approach things in a way that will grow their churches. And they don't fold their arms and expect the church to grow exponentially without any intervention. Now, dynamic pastors look at methods and ways that would be best to increase numbers in their churches, to grow their churches, actually. So it's very, very important that we look at it and say, if you want to be dynamic as a pastor, be initiative in nature. Be creative as well. And that will show that there will be progress and expansion to the work. And you will make sure that you'll start to see the work of the ministry becoming bigger and bigger. And it will grow more exponentially because your approach will be that approach that brings growth. Work on them. You work on progressive people, dynamic people. Also work on the people, on the ministry. Make sure that you bring innovative ideas in the ministry. Now, when you look at dynamic pastors, they will work without supervision. They will actually allow people to work also without supervision in a way that they will develop people to an extent that people can do things themselves and do project themselves and don't rely on the supervision of the pastor always. And so let people become creative, let people also in the ministry be initiative in nature as well. And because the ways of the ministry will need many pots of dynamism from different spheres, from different people. And in that way, you'll see the church will grow. And you'll also look at dynamic people. Don't wait for their ships to come in. They swim out to meet them, and they surely dig their wells as well before they are thirsty. So very, very important that they initiate things well in advance to make sure that things happen before they go. Dynamic people work on themselves as well, and this is a very important one. And I want to emphasize this because it's very important. Dynamic pastors don't take themselves for granted. They learn, they read, they study, they develop themselves to become better. Because you cannot actually remain folding your arms sitting at one place and expect yourself to grow. You grow by learning from others, please, sir. And you read books, please, sir. And make sure that you learn a lot and become a better person. And that's very, very important. And if you want to be a dynamic pastor, please work on yourself. Make sure that you work on yourself and you learn, and don't take yourself for granted. Realize that you will either be the greatest asset of liability, or a greatest asset or liability in your own ministry. Because if you don't empower yourself, you don't learn, you become a liability in your own ministry. But you can become an asset when you start to learn and become a better person. So please don't fold your arms and expect things just to happen. Make sure that you're out there to learn and make sure that you develop yourself, please. And because dynamic people also, they consciously work on themselves. They make sure that they improve, they grow, they hone their and sharpen their skills and their character as well. And they make sure that they lead their congregations better. Very, very important. And that must be a priority of what we call a dynamic pastor. Now, allow me to end up here. Your host, Micornus, Phokane, the leader and the founder of Church Governance Solutions. Allow me to invite you to our social media platforms, Church Governance Solutions, that's a Facebook page, Young Men Empowerment Forum, the Facebook page, and also Micornus, Phokane. Make sure that you visit those platforms. Make sure that you like them, click notification buttons there as well. Remember our YouTube channel as well. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure that you click the notification button on it as well, so that you may be able to be aware when we have posted materials of this kind. You will learn out of them. Also, make sure that you browse through, go through the whole lot of materials that we put on our YouTube channel. And that will help you going forward, and you will never be the same again. I want to wish you well, and I want to invite you to join us tomorrow as we deal with the final session of this topic. And may the good Lord bless you, and join us tomorrow. And allow me to say cheers for now.